We are live, and this is Senate Finance. This is the 31st of January, and we are by Kudo with us today, which are the organization of the Communications Union Districts, CUDs. And they have made a lot of progress in the last few years, and we're going to hear about it. And then later today, we're going to walk through the bill that's here to help them continue to grow. So I've got Rob. That's key. I'm going to say.
That's me.
That's okay. Come on up.
Well, Ellie's actually going to do the presentation, but first let me just say thank you for having us. So I'm Rob Vitsky. I am program staff for VICUDA, the 10 CUDs in Vermont. And we were here a couple times last year. It's a pleasure to be back. But our chair of VICUDA and executive director of Maple Broadband is going to do the presentation.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I may not have this. Ellie?
Yes.
You're okay. Come on up. I don't know. I have FX Flynn on next. Do you have someone else you want to? Okay, yeah, but
So I'm
you're Maple Broadband also.
yes, but
Okay.
these are slides for VICUDA slides. So I'm
Okay.
gonna run through them, and then Rob and FX, we have several others are here for supports. FX in
Okay.
particular around the CUD bill.
He's the familiar.
He's our subject matter expert. Lead subject matter expert on that subject.
Okay.
And many other things.
Okay,
Okay, that's the last slide. Can you go to the first slide, please?
What a great place.
Okay. All right, so this is the type of slide, the Vermont CUD Association. If you go to the next slide, please. I'm gonna run through the first couple of slides fairly rapidly because you have seen them before, you're familiar with the context. I want to make sure that we have time to get to the substance. So these are your Vermont CUDs. There are 10 of us representing 213 towns, if I'm not mistaken, throughout the state of Vermont. Next slide, please. And this slide is about the Communications Union District. And again, it just gives a little bit of a history as to CUD formation, mission, the public ownership aspects, and the Act 71 obligations around universal service. So we actually went over the slides last time we presented last year. So it's mainly listed here just for context and for the record. But I'm not going to go into the details. Unless you have any questions of the slides.
Any questions?
All right, next slide, please. Okay, so as Rob mentioned, there's been a lot of progress. Last year was the year that many of us either got going or we started construction in late 2022. And so last year was service launch for a number of Communications Union districts. And up here are 2 testimonials. There's many more where this came from. And again, not to belabor the point, we all understand the need for broadband and the unserved nature of many of the rural areas of our state. You guys have these slides. You don't need to read the testimonials off that. You can read them. It is obviously great importance to our residents and our Vermonters. Next slide, please. Okay, so here's a couple of examples of 2023 success. And again, we have 10 CUDs. Every CUD made tremendous strides last year. So just a couple of them, these are showing some statistics. The first one happens to be my CUD. We connected our first soft launch customers in January, and we had active service launch in February. In partnership with Waitsfield and Champlain Valley Telecom, we collectively brought fiber service to nearly 4,000 addresses in 2023.
And you did that working collectively with,
Yeah, so our
the telecoms, and that was something, that relationship and how it would work or not work is subject of considerable discussion. So I'm glad that it's working out.
yeah, and that's actually it's a great time to bring up that again there are 10 different CUDs and different CUDs are approaching the same problem, different strategies. So some CUDs are building the network themselves, operating it with a public-private partner. Some CUDs are working with a public-private partner to design and build the network. Maple Broadband is actually doing both, so we're a little bit unique in that way. And then NEK Broadband, so Crystal Shoop's the executive director, and she can answer questions about NEK later, but this is another example. They're up to, they themselves building are over 200 miles with over 2,300 homes passed in 2023. So again, great strides. And I think the key message here is that the strategy is working. The funding we've got, we're putting it to use. We're rolling it out throughout the state. A couple other things not on the slide is Southern Vermont CUD in partnership with Consolidated. They started and finished their mission under Act 71 last year. And then EC Fiber, they finished their original mission, which took them a lot longer, but they were starting without the benefit of all this grant funding. And FX, do you just want to quickly relay your successful bond rating? Because that's a first, which is really exciting, and I don't want to take the words out of your mouth.
Yeah, certainly. The main takeaway is that EC Fiber made financial history in the municipal revenue bond market in November, when Standard & Poor's rated our municipal bonds BB, which is just below investment grade, so really excellent rating. It was the first time a municipal revenue bond had been rated where there was no call on taxpayer money, where there was not a regulated utility involved, and where the underlying business did not have exclusive rights in the territory. So this shows that the financial community recognizes that a business like EC Fiber that is controlled by a municipal entity can not only be a going concern, but can be a solid investment.
That is a good way for us to start. Congratulations.
Yes, so great success for EC Fiber, great milestone.
I'd love to, but that is good.
All right, any questions on this?
No.
Okay, next slide, please. So these are some of the key activities in growth in 2024. So as I mentioned, last year was the year that many of us really got going, but there's a lot more work to happen. So the traction we showed on the previous slide will continue and grow in this year as more and more CUDs launch and continue building active service. So you can see up at the top there, CB, DV, EC, Maple Broadband, and EK Broadband are all in active construction. Otter Creek CD and Lemoyle FiberNet are starting this year, and Northwest Fiberworks has submitted their construction grants application, which is in the process of consideration by the Vermont Community Broadband Board. And the next, that's the Act 71 ARPA funding. And the next federal program we've been talking about for at least a year now is the federal BEAD program. And the BCBB spent a lot of last year, and we spent a lot of last year working with them and offering commentary on the detailed plans in relation to that, to be able to fit the federal program requirements to Vermont's strategy to the degree possible on walking that particular balance beam. And this is the year that the BEAD program is actually going to come into place as the program gets launched, and the RFPs are issued and bidders bid. And again, this is a competitive program. So unlike ARPA, where the state could decide where it wanted to spend the broadband funding, the NTIA, the federal government, requires that BEAD be a competitive program. So the CUD are going to be bidding for BEAD's grants. There's no guarantee that any individual CD is going to win BEAD grants. So we're all obviously very sensitive to this. So hence the fact, the second bullet there is that it's a complicated, very complicated, much more complicated orders of magnitude over the ARPA program, competitive, so we're competing, which is new. And then there's also match requirements. So the program requires a 25% match. So that can be in-kind existing assets, that can also be cash. So.
And I think this may be the money that we borrowed.
Correct.
To do what?
Correct.
To pay back.
Correct, yes, the restoration.
Know what that money is being held for.
Exactly, and that is exactly what it's being there for, is to make sure that CUDs, which are essentially startup entities and don't have the balance sheets to be able to be really aggressive here, are able to be not unfairly disadvantaged, right? So to make sure that it's a level playing field and we can fairly compete and win on the merits.
But for those of us who have sat here since the beginning, when we started, the issue was, where are we going to put an office? How are we going to get a computer? And this is maybe 3 years later, maybe 4. we're out competing and we're stringing, and I think we've succeeded beyond our hopes. Fantastic.
Yeah, well, and it's exciting, rewarding work. Those testimonials are examples of the sorts of calls and emails that we get on a regular basis from people who we've been able to bring service to, and people who are still waiting, who were, someone stopped me at the farmer's market the other day and said, Maple Broadband, I've seen your trucks, you're coming to Waltham, we're so excited, right? And that's this, I mean, it's not every day do you get to work in a job where you have that sort of direct fulfillment and people actually do care and support what you're doing. Okay, so the final thing here is the cross-CD collaboration efficiencies and maturation. So as I mentioned, we've gone from trying to figure out what we're going to do and how we're going to get our computers and how we're going to staff these things to actually rolling out these multi-million-dollar infrastructure projects, which is great. Vacuda itself also received a grant last year with the support of the Vermont Community Broadband Board, and that has also helped us take the Vermont CUD Association from something which was primarily run by volunteers and, very, very part-time staff on a limited budget to actually be able to do more to help us achieve efficiencies and economies of scale by working together. So yes, we spend a lot of time in policy coordination and best practices and really just trying to do things better and also more efficiently and saving money. And, we're all trying to run forward as fast as we can, but also take a little bit of a pause to make sure that we're being efficient. So. And then, small groups of CUDs collaborating on shared interests. As I mentioned earlier, not every CUD has exactly the same business model or operational model. And so we also obviously form smaller groups with people who are doing things similarly. So it's not like every single CUD is sharing all the same activities. There's a bit more diversity there. Any questions on this one before I go to the next slide? Because the next slide is really about the future and since some of the hairier problems.
Yeah, I think that might be a good one, because that's, I believe, Richard Bell is going to be interesting.
Yes, exactly. So next slide, please. And this is, okay, so the road ahead, successful participation in the BEAD program, again, mentioned earlier, it's a competitive program, requires competitive bids, match requirements, and a letter of credit or equivalent. We've been working very hard with our VCBB and our congressional delegation. A year ago, this was, you must have a letter of credit and it must be for 25% of the grant award, and that's the only thing that you can do. And that was a bit of a challenge in terms of getting a letter of credit. So that's that particular challenge. There's now multiple paths to achieving that, but it is still a box that must be checked. So we're working through the details of that because, again, we want to make sure we can check that box the NTIA requires with minimal cost. Because every dollar you spend paying a financial services company to do something or qualify as a dollar you're not spending building broadband. Bridge funding and private debt. So as mentioned earlier, the BEAD program requires match. So we need to make sure, you can't use, for example, you can use ARPA funds as match, but there's, again, an opportunity cost. And so so some CDs are needing bridge funding because also when the BEAD program is a reimbursement program and the money is probably not going to start flowing until next year, depending, who knows, but we're not budgeting until next year. And then there's certain areas that are not eligible for to be built either under either Act 71 or BEAD, but you need to have those areas built in order to get to the BEAD areas. So long story short, everyone has very complicated kinds of geographies, Swiss cheese holes we're trying to fill in, but the grant money itself is not sufficient. And so there's a need for private funding. So we're, again, with Vacuda collaborating together to figure out what that means, because depending on where you are and how much you need, the answer may be different. So that's all going on and taking up a lot of our effort. Financial and operational robustness. I think probably the first bullet here really says it all, that we're evolving from grant funded startups to mature entities. And many of us are looking at EC Fiber and what they have accomplished and saying this is where we wish to be in terms of being financially viable entities. Again, as mentioned earlier, not every CUD has the same strategy, the same business model, but for those of us that are building and operating, this is what we're working towards. And ever-changing competitive environments, as you folks will well appreciate, Act 71 requires that we build the unserved, the underserved. That's the mission. And yes, you sometimes have to build past served areas to get there, but we're hitting the hardest areas first with the grant money, which is appropriate. But it's actually the opposite of what you do if you were building a normal commercial business, where you would start with the most profitable areas first, get that under your belt, make sure that you were a going concern and were financially viable, and then you would expand to the less profitable areas.
Or we just quit,
Or you just quit, right?
which is
But
why you're there.
exactly. But I mean, under the mandate of Act 71, we may not quit anyway. But regardless, we're in a way, from a business perspective, we're actually doing it backwards. And the implication of that is that, again, in a lot of areas of the states, the private sector woke up a little bit, and after a very long time of not investing, has decided that if they don't build fiber in the dense, profitable areas, to be first to market, they're going to be second to market, and that's not going to be good for them. So a lot of the most profitable areas that the CUDs haven't been able to build because the grant funding hasn't allowed us are now kind of taken off the table because the private sector has built them, which means that the areas that we are able to build are by definition less profitable ones, which means, again, it's great that we have all this grant funding, but really just wanted to impress upon all of you that what we are doing is very difficult. We're building the most economically difficult areas first, but also just because of what's going on in the private sector, it's, the area we're able to build is getting smaller and smaller. So that is going on. And then the efficiencies in CUD governance bill, we've put this up here. I'm not going to get into it now because I think once I finish with this, I'll let FX walk you through that and I can lead into the discussion. And then finally, affordability. So you folks may have seen, there's a BT Digger article that came out a couple of days ago that was talking about how the federal affordable connectivity program is expected to run out of funding in April.
The board has also sent us.
Yes, indeed. The board has also made you aware of that, which is great. So the history here, the context here, Vermont, there's currently just over 25,000 people receiving the ACP. That represents about $9 million per year coming to the state of Vermont, and not every household that's eligible has signed up for ACP. We're actually under the national average in terms of signups, which is normal for rural states. That it's easier to get people signed up in dense urban areas. We can more easily build awareness and help people get enrolled. And so that's a barrier. So of those 25,000, under 200 are current CUD customers. So most of those, again, are actually people in the towns and the cities that have had, cable or another fiber provider. And what's going to happen if that's not extended? Very unclear. And even were it not for that that's great, but that's not enough. It only goes to 150% of the poverty line. There's people just above that who legitimately can't afford it. And again, as mentioned earlier, from a Vermont perspective, affordability is an everyone problem. It's not just a CUD problem. And as districts, we have sort of a dual role of service provider, but also municipal districts where we care about all of our citizens, regardless of who their ISP is. And we care about digital equity, and we care about the rising tide lifting all boats, and that all Vermonters need to be connected. So that problem is a statewide problem, not just a CUD problem. From a CUD perspective, as mentioned earlier, we're tackling the hardest areas, right? It's more expensive per mile. There's fewer people per mile. There tends to be lower incomes in rural areas. And so our own balance sheets can only support so much from an affordability standpoint. So that's also important. And then this relates also to, there's a couple of telecom modernization bills around fees. And so the point we want to make here from a policy perspective is just understanding and appreciating that whether you're talking about poles per mile or miles in rural areas or whatnot, there's more mileage in rural areas and there are fewer households to be able to offset those costs. And then the opposite, of course, is true in the cities. Your areas that are more profitable to build, same sort of thing. There's more houses and more potential subscribers, more income per mile. So when thinking about these fees, we need to make sure that we don't try and extract fees from, we can't expect rural areas to subsidize other rural areas. So when you're thinking about the fee structure, first of all, you should appreciate that, if you're, it's already higher cost in rural areas. And so any sort of fee where there's a multiplier, which is based on the number of miles or assets in rural areas, will disproportionately hit those rural areas. And just from a policy perspective, ability to pay fees, needs to be taken into account in terms of how the fee structure works. Right, so for example, you know, having exemptions or having fee structures that would exempt areas that are not profitable, where there's a few households per mile,
What-
is the sort of
what
structure
fees
it anticipates.
Specifically? What fees specifically? What,
Napkins.
okay, it's the matching?
No,
No,
that going up after
Yeah.
CUDs, whether they're attachment fees as it relates to,
okay.
or a
Those-
right of way
Yeah.
fee, which is also being considered a subsidized section.
yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's in law and
Yeah.
I don't, it's in transportation. It goes, okay, so the other one is the attachment fee. And I think, doesn't the pole owner set that?
This is for, hey,
Yeah,
for the,
Oh, the new one,
yes, the new one.
yes.
That's what we're worried about.
yes,
Okay.
yeah.
I can see where you would be.
yeah, so we just want to give you the context for
In that.
Right now.
Right now.
right now, but that's,
I think that might give us some legal problems.
well, exactly, hence thinking about an exemption which is based on infrastructure or reality rather than an exemption based on type of entity.
Okay.
All right, I think I've covered all the points. The next slide, please, is just a finisher, which is that community broadband is all about Vermonters, and that again, the first couple words, led by experts and hundreds of community volunteers, right? That is really the magical mix of the CUDs, that we have paid professional staff who hopefully know what we're doing, and are able to lead ourselves through, but we also have the benefits of literally hundreds of volunteers and people on governing boards, and the tight connections to towns, and that local flavor and local buy-in. 213 towns are members of CUDs, so that's us.
Okay, thank you. Committee, any questions? None? Okay.
Well,
There we go, job done.
FX.
Yes, so FX, would you like to talk about the CUD?
Yeah,
Bill?
come on,
Good.
come on up.
Thanks.
Have you next?
Oh, comments, Madam Chair.
Yes.
Oh.
Go ahead. Okay, so we have.
FX is representing a 40-year overnight success, is that correct? And
17 years.
citizens. So, the CD bill came to legislature almost 10 years ago, and it never made it out of the House. And two EC Fiber folks came up, John Roy and Ernst Lemay.
Yeah.
To see if they couldn't jumpstart the bill that was stuck. And they went over to government operations. And they were advised to ask government operations help, but don't take more than 8 minutes in explaining the problem. And to the amazement of many, they succeeded in keeping it to 8 minutes. Government operations was finished for the year. Government operations was not in charge of the bill. And Roy and Tomei convinced government operations to volunteer their time for a week. And they worked on the bill, made some changes that were recommended without having any authority, and brought it in here. And we added it to a finance bill, and it became law. So when we're here discussing this, because of the volunteers who worked on the birth of these CUDs and came in here and did the right thing, so.
Yeah, well, Herb Tomei wanted to be here today, but just wasn't able to do it, so he asked me to say hello to all of you.
Say hello to him for us.
Tell him he is remembered, and everybody in the room here is in debt to the work that the two of them did.
Yeah, absolutely, and John Roy really what he did was truly heroic. I gotta say, every time I get discouraged about putting in the time and the effort, I think back on what he went through, and it's it doesn't compare.
Thank you, man.
All right, so in an effort to keep under 8 minutes, any questions?
Said with this cancel, so we've got a little more flexibility.
So,
Just introduce yourself to the record.
thank you. My name is Francis Xavier Flynn. I'm from Quechee, Vermont, in the town of Hartford. I go by FX. I am the chair of the East Central Vermont Telecommunications District, and I serve as secretary treasurer of the Vermont CUD Association. The S-199 is legislation that we drafted and asked Senator Clarkson and Senator and Representative Maslin to introduce for us. It's amendments to the to 30 VSA 82, which is the CUD law that was passed in originally in 2015 and amended a couple of times subsequently. Now that we have 10 CUDs, surprisingly, not each and every one wants to have their annual meeting on the second Tuesday of May, which really reflects the fact that the original CUD law was a combination of the 23-town interlocal contract and the bylaws. And that's what we, brought as legislation. So in the bill before you, a number of the governance clauses are changed to say, do it this way unless your bylaws say to do it another way. So now everybody will be able to, through their bylaw process, establish, an equal but different way of meeting all these requirements. Secondly, the year before last, some discussion began about, well, would it make sense for this CUD to merge with that CUD? And if so, how would we do that? We went through, we ran that past, attorneys, and there are basically two answers to it. One is, we could just have all the towns that are not in the CUD that's going to survive, vote to apply for membership in that CUD. That CUD says, okay, you're members, and then there's a transfer of assets, and you've got yourself a merger. That means that you have to go around, you have to make the case to each select board to apply for membership in the CUD. The other, even more onerous process would be to use the municipal merger law, which would involve having town meeting votes in each and every town. And you think about the expense of that, but also it winds up in a way giving like veto power to one town in these regional districts that have already been established and set sail, and are the towns are not on the hook for any taxes. Really, the only responsibility the towns have once a district is set up is to appoint a delegate to exercise the town's vote on the board. So we've come up with what we think is a clean process that respects the Vermont way of doing public engagement and makes sure that the overwhelming majority of people who are looking at this agree that it's a good way to go ahead. And basically, you get a 3/4 majority of the two districts to vote to merge, and then that triggers a public hearing at which the idea about the preliminary plan for the merger would be presented in each district, and then
Quarters majority of whom?
of the district governing board.
Of the district governing.
Right, so for example, in EC Fiber, we have 31 votes on that board. So 3/4 would be something like 23 or 24 would have to vote in favor of presenting a preliminary merger plan at a public meeting. And so the district would run the public meeting, get all the input, so on and so forth. And then and the other district would do the same thing. And then a joint committee would be established based on all the feedback. They would prepare a final merger plan. And then when that was approved by a 2/3 majority of each board, that would affect the merger. So that is simpler, cleaner, keeps it inside the district governance, doesn't impose costs on on unexpected costs on the town by, forcing them to take votes, where people have to go cast a ballot or have a public meeting. And it really makes it more of a pretty careful technical exercise, because if you can't persuade 3/4 of your board that this is a solid idea, and if you can't persuade 2/3 of your board that you really nailed down all the details, it wouldn't go forward. So it's a pretty high standard. So that's the merger part of it. And then the third piece is that we want to be able to continue to have all of our meetings virtual. And this kind of dovetails with some other stuff that's going on in the state legislature. We have all been in our agendas making a note that if somebody wants to come, if somebody wants a physical location, contact the clerk and we'll make some kind of accommodation. At least in EC Fiber's case, over the last 3.5 years since we've been doing that, nobody has come forward. So we would like to have our own, yes, you can do everything virtual, because I know that EC Fiber, for example, we are doing 5 to 7 public meetings every month. One, our governing board, our executive committee, our finance and audit committee, our governance and legal committee, our operations and marketing committee, and our construction and expansion committee. And there's no lack of the ability for interested citizens to engage. And when they do, they're like, oh, you're a good candidate to get appointed as a delegate. So, all the better. But anyway, and also we're concerned that we want to make it even clearer that the business records of the district, this, like EC Fiber, right? We control the business that you know of as EC Fiber, but we contract with GWI Vermont LLC. We don't want to find ourselves in a position one day where they have to provide wiring diagrams to prove that our network is interconnected in more than one way. We don't want to have to disclose how long our generator fuel will last at a particular hub. We don't want to have to disclose what we're paying people who are working in the in management or in staff positions, because they're all being paid by GWI Vermont. And there's been some stuff that's happened, particularly around the healthcare board, where there's some private company activity that wound up having to be published. And particularly in EC Fiber's case, but in the case of any of the CUDs where the district actually owns the business, it needs to have that business activity understood to be not a public record, to have a presumption of it not being a public record.
Okay, my intent, since this committee and I have never done a public record, that's the domain of government operations, that we will send that portion of the bill to them. I know there's a concern because you have a lot of public money that there is public oversight in some way, but that isn't the same as having the entire public oversight.
Right.
So I'm
Right.
pretty sure we can find a way to do it.
Right. And I would say in EC Fiber's case, it's astonishing what we have to make publicly available in order to get to bonds.
Yeah.
You know, so there's vast amount of, detail. But if there are, so that's really my run through and I really appreciate the fact that, some of this is kind of outside of what, ordinarily this committee would talk about. So we're happy to make as many more committee appearances as we need.
We will be going over that, of the 199 this week. We will let you know, or, should we be here, if we have any questions, but, we'll start that discussion probably as early as this Friday.
Okay, great.
Sandra Brock.
I've got just some general operational questions. I'm not sure what our time limit is at this point.
No, we have a few minutes here and then our 2:30, had a family emergency and canceled, so. We
So
will get a
we
break.
speak with FX for probably half an hour.
I'm here.
I'm curious in particular, as far as as the CUDs move out and expand the network and the number of miles and homes that they pass, how do you measure the take-up rate, and are you reporting the take-up rate? 900. That to me is a measure that in terms of our support, what money we put out, that's one of the things we're looking for. What's the return on investment?
Yeah.
In terms of the expansion, is the purpose for which the groups were established. Do you have any numbers that it would give us comfort or give us just some idea of what's going on there?
Sure, the EC Fibers model that was always it's gonna cost us 30,000 a mile to build. We need 6 customers per mile, averaging $100 a month. And then everything will be good to go.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, there are, some of the CUDs now are seeing $60,000 a month cost to build.
Mhm.
But they're also getting significant fraction of that covered by grants. So it's not like, so our model was we're borrowing that $30,000 and we need those customers at that price level, in order to pay that back. So, but I will say, as far as the take rate goes, in towns that we finished building before 2019, we are seeing 60, 65, 70% of primary residential premises take the surface. And, once you factor in all the businesses and all the other locations in E911 that are theoretically servable, right, that comes down. But EC Fiber is really a residential play. So I'm looking at what is the residential uptake and what can we get to? And, we are at 8,000 now. We're shooting to get to 14,000 by the end of 2027. We're shooting to get to 10,000 by the end of this year. And on a town by town basis, we know how many primary residential properties there are, how many households there are, how many customers we have, how many of those premises have cable as an alternative, how many of our customers are at one of those addresses. And it's pretty interesting. It's like the wealthier the town, the greater our take rate is among people who have cable as an alternative. So that gives us, we built out Hartford, Wilder, White River Junction, Queechee. So, and that, that town is, compared to the average, higher, right? Especially because it has so many businesses. But we think that that's a positive sign for our ability to compete effectively against a cable company that's in that area and in Norwich and Woodstock. And so we think that not only does the CUD model solve the unserved and underserved problem, which when we got started was 80,000, now it's 60,000. But it also brings competitive choice to more densely populated areas. So that's a big benefit. I run into people, you know, back in Queechee now, and I say, okay, you might not want to switch, but just call Comcast and say, I have a choice now. Right, and see what happens. And we're seeing some very interesting stuff up in Topsom and Corinth, where Topsom wasn't offering symmetrical service. And now they are, and they have also dropped their prices. And this is 9-10 months before we're gonna connect our first customer in their territory. So I see this as an unmitigated good for Vermonters, and I think that we will be able to maintain our financial performance, pay for our bonds, you know, take care of our staff. It's always gonna be a near thing, but I see a path forward.
Well, right now, you know, EC fiber is almost in a class by itself compared to other CUDs.
Yeah.
And if we look overall, where should we look at financial performance statistics on a CUD by CUD basis? So, for example, one of the major concerns I think that we've had all along the line is that the cost that CUDs have of taking cable to a premise will be great, that you've got a cable going by the window, but people can't afford to connect to it. And how do we stay abreast for whether or not that's a problem?
Oh, believe me, you're probably gonna hear a lot from me next year about that. Because there's gonna be all this money for the BEAD program. And in the digital equity part of it, there's a real opportunity to develop some kind of a funding mechanism that would enable properties to some kind of subsidy program that would do that. I mean, I've thrown out some ideas. I know Rob Fish is working on an idea along these lines. And I think that one of the things that's going on right now is that there's a lot of staff work going on at VCBB where they have to report up to the federal government, and they are trying to develop a clear standard for how the CUDs report so they can make some comprehensive reports. So I think some of the questions that you're asking about, how do we monitor this? How do we pay attention to it? You're going to start to see things this year that go a long way towards providing some satisfaction.
I can speak to CD Fiber's success. Janelle Smith, Executive Director of CD Fiber. We started construction this past year. We're hooking up our 100th customer on Friday, actually. And when we did this modeling about 18 months ago, we projected that by year 1, we would have 20% take rate. By year 2, we would have 30% take rate. And by year 3 would be around 41% take rate was our goal. We served our first customers in Calais in October under 2 distribution areas, and we have a total take rate currently of 41.9%. So we have far exceeded it. In addition to that, we projected that our average rate per user would be around $92, and it's around $96 per month, which means that customers are signing up, more customers are signing up, and more customers are signing up for larger packages. So if you're to take our model in this sample set, that it has far exceeded what we anticipated, and we're putting dollars toward marketing as well to get the word out, and we're working on affordability and really grassrooting with our communities.
Are there regular financial reporting that are available to us, in which we can see this on an ongoing basis across each CUD in a consistent way?
It's all public, yes, all public. Yeah.
And that, I think we knew when we did the CUD film, that the one thing we did not address was affordability. And we looked at it several times. We also heard that the startup CUDs were leveraged to the hilt, and they couldn't put any money in. And
that was one of the concerns we had as we looked at as a model of Franklin Telephone. In which they had a variety of tiers of service that was being offered, and what they found is that the vast majority of their customer base was only taking the lowest tier of service that had an effect on profitability and a variety of other things. And again, that was one of the concerns we're looking at the CUDs. Are we going to see that same thing, or are we going to see something different?
And I think Calais isn't northern you know, Franklin County, that different communities,
Mhm.
people around the State House, this area would value and need hookups maybe more than the farmers are. Thank you. And we are right, I think, finishing part. So anyway, it's good to know that there is something coming down federally that we might be able to use to help people hook up, because it is very expensive.
I just want to make one point to that question, Senator Brock. So we've seen similar take rates in Maple broadbands, to what CB5 are seeing in terms of people requesting service. And not everyone who orders service winds up installing it for a variety of reasons that might change their minds or anything could happen. But that is a KPI that we track, CB5 tracks it, it's consistently tracked. And then also to your point, the product mix. From our sides, as of last month, about 43% of people picked the middle package, and then about 26% picked the highest package. So we've actually seen, I think it's the 30s, whatever's left there. But we actually do track that, and when we did our original business model, we projected 60% would pick the lowest package. We've actually seen it essentially the other way too. About 60% pick the middle or higher packages. But these are very good things, because that will also relate to the marketing efforts of the CUD as well as the demographics of the underlying area. But great things, and yes.
So when are we gonna see everybody connected by fiber through CUDs? What day? When?
I'm not sure we have a clear answer on that, because each CUD is on its own path. I mean, from Maple broadband, we should be done, well, again, we're not necessarily gonna have service everywhere, right? Because the private sector's built out some. So there's, when we hit universal service under Act 71 will probably be next year. Some others will be this year. Some others may take longer. I think that's a.
Well, the reason we started this was to get universal broadband, and that was a selling point. And that basically what we heard is if we do this, we create CUDs, we do all these, we're gonna have universal broadband, so that nobody will be that a fiber cable will pass everybody's house. And so I'm just wondering when. Originally we heard 5 years. That's what was talked about when these discussions started. So I'm wondering what's the date?
That would be 2029, 5 years.
5 years.
Anyway,
We're
thank
gonna
you very
have
much.
to
We
move
have
along.
I guess I didn't get an answer to that question.
Thank you so much.
You're gonna ask me again though.
And do you report these statistics to the broadband board? I mean, I think there's a place that, as long as we're putting, you know, taxpayer dollars into this, we're gonna need to be able to assess if it's, you know, if signing up enough people to pay your bills in the long run. And I think that's it. There needs to be a reporting mechanism, but that would probably be short if anybody can come in and get your wiring plans for your.
Oh, yeah, no, that level of detail, every single month at our board meeting, you know, we get an operator's report that has a lot of detail.
Okay.
And if you, and, you know, certainly in the bond documents, you know, there's a chart that discusses, you know, penetration by, you know, when the town was built. I would be happy to, you know, share with you, you know, how we look at those stats. You know, internally, I don't think there's any, you know, might be some stuff that I wouldn't necessarily want, you know, everybody to go. That's why we have it in the bond document. We talk about towns built before 2019, you know. And then the other thing is that, I want to figure out how to, you know, be able to report this. And one of the things is, it seems like there's been, you know, slow progress, right? Because we were at what, 64,000, now we're at like 62 or 60,000 or whatever. But I keep saying, no, the starting number is 80,000. That's what it was when, you know, when we started, or you could say it was 100,000. And it started when we pushed all that broadband money in 2009 through Springfield Telephone and created VTEL. I mean, the state has been doing a lot
Oh, yeah.
to solve the problems of, to solve the problems of unserved and underserved with fiber.
Yeah,
Really,
we're going to
for a
find-
long time, right?
Yeah,
And there's been considerable progress, that's been made. And the DCDD is trying to develop something where you can kind of watch, where you can, watch the progress
yeah,
go along. And, and there are, and it's like, okay, well, but is that progress today? No, not really, because sometimes it takes a few months
yeah.
before
yeah.
you can say that, this was done when and so on
Well,
and
I
so
think
forth,
we're
so.
just looking for a way that we can ensure, probably through the broadband board,
Right,
that as a whole, if somebody's getting shaky and they aren't hooking up enough customers to pay their bills, we should probably have a way of knowing that before it hits the front page of the paper.
they're doing that in spades.
Okay, good. I think that's
There's-
gonna be the trade-off.
Senator, just for the UND, they're doing too much of that.
I know. We tend to go over.
To answer Senator Brock's question, I believe Governor Shumlin.
We will.
Right, but that's the issue that we continually see. And I'm just concerned that in 2034, when Senator McCormick and I are viewing this from our graves, we're going to still see newspaper reports saying that in 5 years, we're going to get the rest of the Vermonters connected to broadband.
Oh, by then there'll be something new, so don't.
Sort of Zeno's paradox, so we get
Okay,
closer.
I'm gonna call this to an end. We have one more witness and then, because we had a witness cancel, we've got like a 45-minute break. And we'll see you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for all the work.
Snelling is deadline too.
Yes, and we did not get to the Marshall
Sorry.
Islands, thanks.
Snelling, we'll break it all.
And what-
No, 2:45 is when it's coming, 45, I'm ready.
Okay. All right, so we're holding this at 2:30 and it's at 2:30. Okay, you don't get straight. Because we're behind time. So our next subject we're taking up is S-182. That's the
No.
an
2:36.
Okay, an actual, no. And 2:30 and 2:15, yes, we are.
That's right, yeah.
Okay, so the third chance. Right. So we're gonna take up S 236, which is the altering the aesthetic rule in Act 248 for renewable energy products, and we have Allison Dispathy.
You got it, yes. Yeah.
Okay, come on up.
Thank you so much.
We just asked you to introduce yourself for the record.
Yes, but Allison Destafi, Danville, Vermont resident. I'm just testifying as a citizen. I'm on the planning commission in Danville, but I am just testifying as myself. I'm not obviously representing the Danville Planning Commission. I want to make sure I'm clear on that.
Okay.
And I'm not techie at all. I'm a pen and paper. So Zane's gonna maybe try to see if I can share my
Yeah.
screen.
So there should be a share screen button on Zoom and you can just click it and
Oh, you opened it up for me.
click
Awesome.
the window, yeah.
Okay, perfect. I just have to make sure I have the right one here. Bear with me, I apologize. So Zane, I just need to then make sure that it's open on mine, right? And
Yes, have the
where-
presentation open and then when you hit share screen, you should be able to just click on the window with the presentation and it should pop up.
Okay. Oh, I apologize, it's not popping up.
Don't worry, it happens to all the people in people.
Would you like me to come over and?
Maybe, yeah, possibly, I'm so sorry.
No.
So I hopefully need that, so I have that. Oh, you got it. And then you have
There you go. It's up.
I wrote the, yes.
Thank you. Okay.
In October, yeah.
Okay, good, yeah, exactly. We all know these pictures. So plenty of these scenes that we've all seen around and we love, and probably one of the major reasons that we all live here, honestly. I know this is what brought me here. I grew up near Valley Forge, in basically Mr. Rogers' neighborhood. And I had Valley Forge, so that was where I was first introduced to wild and nature and beauty, and that was where I found my comfort, and I seek it all the time, especially because I have 3 crazy kids, so I like to hit the woods. And I just bring it up because I think it just puts into perspective why we're here, why a lot of us are here, and what we cherish about our state. And I mean, this is from down the road from me. We don't have this view from my house, but my family calls it the $1 million view in Danville. And it's gorgeous. And every day when I drive down and I see this, it's, you know, what it does to our soul. I mean, I think honestly, all of us know that, and it's why we sacrifice certain things to live in this state. My daughter made me put that one in. Was that?
View of the presidential raid.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah, because we're over
That's New
there.
Hampshire.
Yeah, I know, that's a great hiking space. So yeah, so those are just looking down, and I just wanted to start it with that because it's precious to us. And so when we're talking about renewable energy siting, you know, we have to be looking at responsibility and the impact that these choices are going to have. And I had studied in Australia, and I was fortunate enough to live with an Aboriginal group of people and really learned their connection with the land. And I think we, in our communities, in our areas, we really are the stewards. We're the ones that understand what goes on in our spaces, and we want to take care of them. And that's why I must say, I really take great offense when I heard Jocelyn talk about NIMBYs. I know that's often a derogatory word, but we have a right and a responsibility to care for the lands and the space that we live in. And so I just wanted to point that out because I do feel, I don't know her personally, but she was vicious. I will say she was very brutal, and there was classist and racist and privileged and NIMBYs. And really, I think when you come back to it, I'm on the planning commission and I'm on there because I care about what happens in our communities. And you guys are obviously here because you care about what happens in Vermont. And so I just want to put that word in perspective and how a lot of times people are labeled and how they're looked at just because they want an active role.
Right, I think that what balance we're trying to find is nobody wants to destroy
Exactly.
that view.
Right.
But that if we don't do something about climate change, that view will go away. If it keeps getting warmer, the maple trees won't be here, they'll be further up in Canada.
Yeah.
So it's trying to find that balance. Where do we put the renewable solar energy so that we can keep what we have from being destroyed by nature?
And that's where I would also go back to is keeping Act 248 intact, because it's, I think pretty much everyone in Vermont embraces renewable energy. We all know it has a role to play. It's you know, it has its place. But then it's also, Act 248 allows for that real full community engagement. It brings the person to the table. I am committed to my land, I'm committed to my space, I understand the climate piece and the renewable energy. How can we do this together? How can we facilitate it? And so otherwise I feel, I mean, you look at Jocelyn, for example, and no offense to her personally, but you can tell she's a bulldog of a lawyer. And so I just look at the fact that if you have industry with someone like that working for them, they've got the money, they've got the people, they know the ins and the outs, right? And then you have neighbors and they don't even know where to begin. So that process of Act 248 allows them to start engage and hopefully with help engaging. So I'm kind of like off track. I want to read what I have.
That's okay.
Yeah, I probably should just start from the piece, but that's sort of where I'm coming into this space. And I just also, I don't know how, there's just another picture. This is from Peachum. We all know these beautiful pictures, my goodness. This is from a place where we hike. I don't know where my dog took that one, but you know, it's our beautiful spot. So I'll start just with reading here. So Vermont's natural scenic beauty, we're all fortunate to live here. I sort of just went through that whole piece. Not only does the natural scenic beauty feed our soul and recharge our spirit, it also drives tourism and is a fundamental component of our economy. Vermont towns and the state as a whole thrive due to a healthy tourist industry, which grows every year. As we seek natural beauty and all that Vermont has to offer, we take great pride and great care of our charismatic and unique communities, our view sheds, and our aesthetic and historical heritage. We care about what happens in our environment and communities. So basically, the Agency of Commerce and Community Development, tourism in Vermont, and you guys probably know this already, but $3 billion industry, supports over 30,000 jobs, over 10% of Vermonters' workforce. Last year at the Tourism Day at the State House, Vermont Chamber of Commerce shared tourism as the second largest economic contributor in the state. Vermont's visitor economy brought 13 million visitors, $3.2 billion, $387.3 million in annual tax revenue. People come here for.
Is a major part.
It's a major part of it, yes, we obviously all know that. We have all prioritized living here because of this, etc. Vermont looks like it does today because all of us dedicated Vermonters who understand our role as stewards of the precious environment that sustains us. Physically, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, economically. It is this natural scenic beauty that brings visitors to our state to recharge, connect with nature, escape the work grind, industrialization, urbanization, and crowding. That's why people want to come here, right? We all know that nature is a part of us. We come from it, we'll return there. This, Senator McCormick, goes to you because I feel like you probably have more quotes tucked away in your mind than I've ever seen from somebody. It always blows my mind that you can like pull them out like that. But just some quotes. The mountains are calling and I must go. All good things are wild and free. Going to the mountains is going home. Not all those who wander are lost. The richness I achieve comes from nature, the source of my inspiration, Claude Monet. We still don't know 1,000th of 1% of what nature has revealed to us, Einstein. In nature, nothing exists alone, but man is a part of nature, and his war against nature is inevitably a war against himself, Rachel Carson. I share these quotes because they remind us of the foundation that nature provides for all of us. And I also want to say, I don't know if you guys have ever seen the pictures of when they first started rolling out electricity through the towns, and there were just crazy, crazy layers. Like you could barely even see the streets. There were so many layers of wires. And now you look at how that technology has evolved, right? And the same thing goes from a solar standpoint. How much destruction do we allow to the natural environment before the technology ramps up enough? We're like, oh gosh, we didn't need to do that. But look, we just, took down that entire forest. We just cleared 50 acres of land, for that. So these are all pieces that I feel like do need to be taken into account while we're considering. So with this gift we are surrounded by, we have a duty and obligation as stewards and community members to keep an eye on our wild spaces, help guide and protect these areas that we inhabit through this lifetime. Act 248 honors and allows people, and especially neighbors, to have a full seat at the table and fully engage. We just finished up the enhanced energy plan with the town of Danville. Correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm sorry, but John might know the answer to this. I was going to ask Senator Bray, but he's not here. I think it was him who is responsible for the substantial deference. Does anybody know the answer to that?
That was Senator Bray's initiative.
Yeah.
John Bray then.
Yeah.
For clean environment.
Yeah, thank you. I think I do remember that. And so the reason I bring it up is on the Planning Commission, we were empowered to carefully and responsibly think about renewable energy siting and practices that will encourage efficiency within our local area. Where do we think these could go? What should we do? That was obviously, you all know, the enhanced energy plan. Senator Bray gave the towns, which I think was of great respect, substantial deference. These people on this commission and in this town know where these things should go, know where it makes sense, know where the special places are. When you're driving down Route 2 from 91 over to Montpelier, if you guys know Danville, I'm not sure, but we've got this beautiful pull-out space and you've got people selling tie-dyes, making pizza, that sort of thing. That's our view shed.
I've seen a pull-up, but I guess it's been in winter.
Oh yeah, there's oftentimes like a little party going on over there, and there's a really great farm nearby, and people love to stop. And just like at the $1 Million View where I am, like I'll see cars and
that's the one of the presidential range.
Exactly.
It's fantastic.
That's Franconia Ridge. You're looking at it like Lafayette, etc. Yeah. And so that's where you think about you know, there's certain places in towns that people really want to protect, you know, from a tourism standpoint, from a beauty.
Has your town identified areas that would be suitable?
Yes,
Then you should have substantial deference.
right,
You know, as long as they're not 20 miles down a steep, dark road,
right, exactly.
then you should be able to.
Yeah, and that's what I wanted to say, you know, basically, we're grateful and thankful for that, and every single situation, as we know, is gonna be very, very different and needs to be looked at. And that's where I would also say that the substantial deference is great, but we also acknowledging that neighbors know their, you know, close spaces very well, and every plan, what would it be called, sorry, proposal, every proposal is gonna be very different. And that's where being able to have that full engagement allowed, and obviously the PUC is gonna be the final decision maker. You know, they're gonna be able to say, nope, that's not acceptable, or whatever it might be. So we just finished, yeah, the enhanced energy plan. S-236 compromises this plan and the fact that local residents are key to responsible energy siting in their communities. And then I just wanted to talk a little bit about, I do want to talk about Renewable Energy Vermont and tourism research. I already said those numbers. There's links in here, so when I send it to you guys, you can link in. I already shared the numbers about Vermont Chamber of Commerce. Vermont Byways, this is another thing we should keep in mind too. Lonely Planet Vermont and Vermont Vacation. So many people come here, we've seen it all before, to drive, to bike, to walk on our beautiful roads. So when you talk about trying to get shielding, you know, just making sure that these projects are done right. And obviously, Renewable Energy Vermont is industry. We have to recognize that. And we have to recognize the fact that they might be an industry that we think is gonna save the world and they're gonna help us out, but they're still industry and they're driven by profit, and we know that. And one simple look at Renewable Energy Vermont. I didn't mention that one, I'll go back. And I don't know if this is actually gonna work. We'll see if I can get it to work.
That's
Oh,
their,
I think it is.
that's their website.
I was trying to get, is it allowing me? Yeah, to their board.
Yeah.
I mean, their entire board, and I know you guys know this, but I feel like it really needs to be said on the record. You know, we're talking about transmission development, Green Mountain Solar, you know, they are industry.
It is an industry.
100%, they are an industry. And the other part is, if I can get back to my other one. The sponsors, or maybe I can go up here.
No, that's just become a member.
Yeah, sorry, thank you, you're on it. It turned off my volume, I apologize for that. Okay, so,
No, I don't think you want anything on there.
I do actually, I want member directory.
Oh, okay.
So I just want to see, you guys to see their members.
Yeah.
It's all renewable energy and the lawyers that represent them, you know, and this is where they've got money, they've got lawyers, they go into towns. And I'm not saying that there's anything nefarious, but they don't care about the towns in the way that the community members care about the towns. And this is where community members all of a sudden hear about a project often last minute and they're like, what is happening? What's going on? And this is where I have to say Vermonters for a Clean Environment, Annette and Brooke Dingledine, this is where they come into play. People get their names and they're like, can you help us? We have no idea where to begin. No idea. So I just wanted to point that out. So we recognize what we're dealing with. An industry that many people love and adore, but still an industry. And a profit-driven industry with lots of subsidies coming their way. So obviously S-236 would open up the path for a lot of these communities to be steamrolled because it streamlines the industry's process. And in the meantime, obviously bypasses community involvement, neighbor involvement, and quite possibly the environment, because that's not where they live. And they are they are profit driven. So I just want to acknowledge that part of it. And then. I don't know if I can get back to my other thing, but I'll get there in a second. So. The other piece, yeah, so it does open up the floodgates for the industry, as I said. Act 248 allows for the full engagement of any party affected by projects that comes to their homes, promoted by industry driven by for-profit projects. Act 248 creates the space to respect the uniqueness of each project, honors Vermonters' love of their environment and local spaces, and creates the path for meaningful broad spectrum involvement. I talked about my issue with Jocelyn using NIMBYs and the way she referred to people. She also said that those seeking party status, for whatever reason it would be, had self-interested and occasionally irrational opposition. That could be decided by the PUC, but obviously they're coming forward with an issue that should be considered. And it is critical that affected parties can submit a notice that identifies their concerns and explains how the commission might be able to address their concerns, as Wilczek mentioned. This is the whole point. Act 248 allows for critical analysis of the plan by those who understand and know the environment best, definitely more than the developers. These local neighbors often have no idea how to engage in the process and ensure that their projects are done right. So obviously, if you picture Jocelyn Wilczek representing the interests of the developers, this is overwhelming for many. Industry has access to the money, the players, I've mentioned that. And it is clear that all projects deserve scrutiny while being evaluated by communities and neighbors who are the local stewards and are directly impacted by these projects. My last point regarding the renewable energy industry is that towns talk. I look at what's going on in towns and planning commissions and select boards all the time. And there have been multiple projects that have broken trust with communities. There's a warranted and real lack of faith and trust in these developers coming into people's communities. A prime example of this is the recent Stamford Wind project. I read an article in 7 Days, I think it's Kevin McCollum, who was describing what happened with the Stamford Wind situation. I saw Lynette's name in there, so I reached out to Annette for an interview. Annette Smith was integral in helping the community of Stamford understand the regulatory process and how to participate effectively. This project did not meet the stated goals of the town's enhanced energy plan or that of the Bennington regional plan. Specifically, it did not meet the mandatory setback requirements of 1 kilometer, which would have placed the turbine in dangerously close proximity to many residential homes. It also was not sited in the area specified for preferred wind tower placement as determined by the town. They did not care. They were going to steamroll this through. In an interview with Annette, I said, what just happened there? Quote, Norwich Solar, Martha is down here. She's Norwich Solar. She's on Rev. I'm sure she wasn't so happy. There she is. Norwich Solar is giving Vermonters the perfect example of how to turn people against renewable energy. This is what Annette said happened. 1, find a site 2 years ago in a town whose village has views of a ridgeline full of Massachusetts wind turbines in which the Vermont town had no say. Don't tell anyone. Get a standard offer contract a year ago. Don't tell anyone. Clear cut a forest and install a wind measurement device and gather data for a year. Don't tell anyone. Meet with regional planners and choose to ignore town and regional plans that mandate a setback off 1 kilometer from year-round residential buildings. Make it clear the project will proceed, giving the finger basically to the town and regional plans that will receive substantial deference from the PUC. File an advance notice giving the community only 45 days before filing the petition. File twice for extensions of the standard offer contract deadline for filing the petition. File under 45-day advance notice for a wind measurement tower. Create a confusing mess in the regulatory process with 4 different PUC cases. Attend town board meetings but don't answer questions. Disrupt sales and construction plans in the nearby development during a housing
I'm
crisis.
gonna have to interrupt.
This is my last part.
Okay.
I promise I'm done. Give the town the challenge of raising $1,000 to participate at the PUC, consuming the lives of the community for more than a year. This is totally my last part. It is important for other Vermont towns to understand what Stamford experienced so they can be prepared if a similar project situation happens. Norwich Solar, Staskis, this woman was involved in the Holland, Swanton, Irisburg, Pittsburgh Ridge, Vermont wind project proposals, all which became highly contentious and eventually failed. So there's a lot of contention and a lot of concern when these industries come into towns. So my last and final wrap up is, it is essential that Vermonters can continue to hold a meaningful and engaged role in the development of their communities. Having the ability to intervene and receive party status will allow for the responsible siting of renewable energy projects in Vermont. Renewable Energy Vermont, who wrote this bill with Senator Ann Watson, as Jocelyn Wilczek discussed, is the industry. They have money, connection, power, and an entire lobbying outfit and a deep familiarity of the Act 248 process. Fortunately, Vermonters have their legislators, you, representing their best interests and that of their towns. Fortunately, they also have Annette Smith and Brooke Dingledine to help them attempt to understand and navigate the complicated process in order to hold a real seat at the table and positively influence and guide the projects that directly impact their homes, communities, local environments, and the entire economy of our state. I urge you not to move this bill forward and to assess the recent analysis shared of actual PUC cases that were rejected and why they were rejected. These are all minimal, all with good warranted reason, as you will find. You'll easily find that this bill is not necessary. In reality, this bill appears to offer industry the ability to steamroll projects through communities at the expense of neighbor participation and quite possibly at the risk to local environments and communities. Keeping Act 48 intact will result in Vermont achieving the goal of responsible, well-thought-out siting of renewable energy projects with minimal impact on our natural scenic beauty, which is Vermont's true wealth. And I just had 2 last pictures to share. But Zane, I might need your help. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, you just gotta click on the yellow tab up at the top of your screen, I believe, so. Yeah,
I just wanted to get back to my slideshow.
that is your slideshow.
Oh, and how do I get back?
Click on the yellow tab up in the middle of your screen at the top to set.
Oh, it's blocked. That's my problem. It's blocked by that little
Oh, yeah.
thing. Yeah, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay, let me see if I can find it. It keeps coming down to block my thing. I'm so sorry.
Never get a cab when you need one.
I'm
There
so
we go.
sorry.
Okay, we're back.
No, that's a different one.
That's.
I can go to the other screen quickly.
You'll see. I have to show you guys
Okay,
these
I
pictures.
just have to get moving because I've got 2 more witnesses and one has to leave by 3:30.
Okay, and this is, I promise, okay, this is some of the stuff that's happening. This is in southern France. I mean, we just start to look at, obviously, we don't, I'm not saying Vermont's gonna end up like this. And I
It looks
hope
like
never
Virginia.
does. It's crazy, look at that. That's in China. This is crazy. I mean, look at that mountain. That's in China. You know, and this is why the people have to be involved. It's just nuts to see that stuff rolling out. I mean, that's just destruction. And obviously they still got crazy cold. And I know you want me to stop. So, yes.
You stop.
No, thank you for your time. I appreciate it. I just wanted you guys to hear sort of a small little citizen on the ground perspective.
No, I think that it has been very helpful.
Okay, all right. Thank you guys very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. We, is Barbara Neal zooming in?
Yes.
So this is all Zoom, okay. So this is the update that the committee requested from the dispatch. I'm not sure what their formal name is, but the dispatch task force. Okay, and our Neil is here.
Who is the dispatch?
Well,
Yes, of course.
I will let Barbara tell you. Okay, Barbara, the floor is yours. You know the routine. You know.
I do. It's a little bit hard for me to hear you. So if I don't respond to something, just say it again or get my attention. But good afternoon, everybody. For the record, I'm Barbara Neal, Executive Director of the Enhanced 911 Board and co-chair of the Public Safety Communications Task Force, which is what I'm here to talk about today. The task force sent over a report to your committee and a few others on January 12th, giving you an update on where we stand with the work that we've been assigned. And so I'm just going to kind of recap that report that was sent then. I did send it over again to Zane just a little while ago.
Okay, so we could probably post that.
It is posted.
It is posted, all right, then I need to update this because it doesn't have anything. Okay, keep going. I can.
Okay. So just a little bit of background. The Public Safety Communications Task Force was created in June of 2023 upon the enactment of Act 78. The task force was directed to oversee and manage the transition to a statewide, reliable, secure, and interoperable public safety communications system, comprising integrated 911 call taking and regional dispatch systems, and to ensure that system is equitably and sustainably financed and universally accessible by everyone throughout the state. So the Act 78 defined the membership of the task force and named Commissioner Jennifer Morrison of the Department of Public Safety and myself as co-chairs of the task force. They also, the Act 78 appointed Paul White, who is the chair of the Berrytown Select Board and was the chair of a previous regional dispatch working group. He was assigned to the task force as well, and then the membership of the task force actually elected Paul as vice chair for the task force. We also have Mayor Mike Dunges from Rutland City, appointed by the Vermont League of Cities and Towns. Chief Ron Kumitz from the Alberg Volunteer Fire Department, appointed by the Vermont State Firefighters Association. The PSAP administrator from the Shelburne PSAP, and PSAP means Public Safety Answering Point. PSAP administrator Jim Mack, appointed by the Vermont Association of Chiefs of Police. And finally, we have Michael Wright, who is the CEO of Calex Ambulance, appointed by the Vermont Ambulance Association. So the first meeting of the task force was held on June 28th, 2023. That meeting was held just a day or two, I believe, after the veto session that resulted in the enactment of Act 78. We have been meeting regularly since. We plan to continue meeting weekly or every other week for the foreseeable future. We do have a web page available it is housed within the Department of Public Safety website, which provides information on our past and upcoming meetings. The webpage is located there because Department of Public Safety was required by Act 78 to provide administrative support to the task force. So Act 78 laid out numerous requirements for the initial work of the task force. Our immediate priority was to develop and release 2 requests for proposals, or RFPs, to acquire project management support, and a second to obtain system planning expertise, both of those to assist the task force in meeting the requirements of the Act. The RFPs were issued in late summer, early fall last year. You can view those on that webpage I referenced. And then in November, the task force issued a third RFP seeking legal support services. So the status on all 3 of those, in late December, company Televate was selected as the winning bidder for the project management services RFP. Contract was executed on January 5th. A kickoff meeting was held on January 10th. Selecting a dedicated project manager for the task force to serve as a trusted advisor, actually, to the task force has been a top priority. So we are happy to have Televate on board. One of the first tasks that Televate was assigned, if you will, was to assist the task force with a review of the responses received on the other RFP, the system planning RFP. And the task force actually this morning, or earlier this afternoon, actually made a decision to made a vendor selection in that procurement and authorized the co-chairs and the vice chair to enter into contract negotiations with one of those vendors. And of course, we'll release the name of that vendor once we have an executed contract. And then finally, on the third RFP, contract negotiations are currently underway with the successful bidder for the legal services support as well. One of the possibilities that Act 78 gave us was to consider and fund pilot projects during 2023. The task force, however, decided against initiating any pilot projects until the system planning and project timelines have been developed further. So it did not make sense to the task force to initiate pilot projects until we have a system plan. And that is going to be the work of the subject matter expertise, subject matter experts hired in the system planning RFP. There were a couple of deadlines identified in Act 78. One is for a September 2024 deadline for the completion of various data collection and analysis requirements outlined in the Act. And a second deadline was December 2024, related to having a final system plan identified. The task force is hopeful but not certain about our ability to meet those deadlines. We will have more specific timelines and more confidence in how we are going to meet them, or what a more realistic expectation is once we get this contract for system planning services executed. So we should know fairly soon where we stand on those deadlines, and can let you know. Act 78 designated some funding, $1 million, in fact, in general funds for the task force to retain the project manager and various subject matter and technical experts. Additionally, the Joint Fiscal Office was authorized to approve another $1 million if needed for consulting costs in 2023. Those consulting costs were not needed in 2023. But we are working with legislative partners to ensure that appropriate mechanisms are in place to allow access to, well, we have access to the first 1 million, so to allow access to the second 1 million if it's needed as the work advances, regardless of what year that happens in. We do not currently expect that the project management, system planning, and legal support costs will exceed 2 million. And to date, there have been only very minimal expenses related to task force member per diem payments.
We gotta stop.
Whoops.
The camera for some reason.
The camera is off.
I moved my laptop, did I do it?
Yep, that did it.
I don't see you. Should I continue?
I think you can continue because we're on a really tight
Okay.
witness, and I want to give you some rebuttal time. There's
Sure.
a fair amount of criticism in this building.
Okay, understood. I just have a couple more things to kind of summarize that report that was sent over. Talking now about stakeholder engagement and communications. Updates regarding the work of the task force were distributed to law enforcement, EMS, and fire membership organizations in September, and then again in December. Ongoing stakeholder engagement and broadening our stakeholder group and interactions is a top priority for 2024. And in fact, the successful bidder for the system planning RFP will be tasked with developing an effective mechanism for soliciting and cataloging stakeholder input for the task force. So we certainly invite all stakeholders in the meantime to join our meetings or reach out to any of the task force members with questions, concerns, or input. We did include 2 legislative asks in the report listed on the last page. One is for language that ensures those mechanisms are in place to allow us clear access to the second $1 million in funding for technical expertise. That language is, I believe this is still the case, being developed within the budget adjustment process. The other ask, which is being considered separately, is that there be language that requires all public safety communication centers doing business in or for a Vermont agency to comply with the requirements for data collection outlined in Act 78. There's been some discussion about wanting to ensure a complete and thorough responses from all of the dispatch entities so that we have a clear and accurate picture of the dispatch landscape or the emergency communications landscape in Vermont.
We asked you to do.
Pardon me?
The inventory that we asked you to do of what was out there. In the way of equipment and dispatch services and.
Yes, that's what I'm referring to. So a mechanism to require that information be provided. So the work of doing that hasn't begun yet. That's going to be part of the subject matter. I'm sorry, the system planning experts that are coming in. But it was just been a point of discussion that there may be some hesitancy to do that. So we'd like to have a mechanism in place to ensure we get the best data.
Okay.
And that's what I have on the report. I'll hand it back to you, Senator Cummings.
Can you wait for a few minutes because we've got one citizen who would like to talk, and then I want to let you have a chance to answer any questions that come up.
Certainly.
Okay, and he's got a very tight time frame.
Certainly. Okay.
Thank you. Can we get Mr. Goldstein?
Yes, do you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. You look like you're kind of floating in the bay or the ocean.
My background picture of the Charles River and the Boston skyline.
I should have known that. Okay. Just introduce yourself for the record and the floor is yours.
Yes, hi, my name is Fred Goldstein. I'm a principal with the Inter-Isle Consulting Group. Over the past decade, I've done various projects for the state-related work in Vermont, including 2 studies of E911 failures that I did for the Public Service Department, and some other work for the PSD. I also did feasibility study for the Central Vermont CUD, so I'm familiar with the way things are structured. And Inter-Isle has done a lot of work in public safety, especially in the Boston area. The issues we run into, you had a great opportunity in Vermont now because you have a pool of federal money to work with to do some quick improvements. And you're really looking at the intersection of telecommunications and public safety because the statewide public safety system requires interconnection with the telecommunications resources. And you have the CUDs as a new resource that's pretty much unique to Vermont and having most of the state have municipal fiber. The rest of the country doesn't have that and frees you from having to deal entirely with the incumbent telecommunications carriers and the few competitive carriers who are around. So that's a great opportunity. As far as how to approach this, I would say the key to anything that's dealing with multiple agencies, state police, local dispatch, regional dispatch, you want to move to local public safety, is to look at this point as an architecture issue, rather than at this point design. Architecture is how do we make things fit together? It's the overarching guideline from which design follows. Architecture is where you think about where to come out, where to put in the resiliency so that if something fails, if a communications link fails, the system still works. And so really the first thing that I would suggest be done is to look at the architecture, have the SMEs agree with the towns on an architecture, with the state, agree with all the agencies. And this is where the task force SMEs can come in on, is this an architecture for a network? Design follows architecture, and it's easier when you've thought about it in architectural terms. Design is getting down to the details. Where do we put the towers? Which types of radios? Where is it VHF? Where is it UHF? And that makes the procurement process easier because you've essentially established standards up front. What it also gives you, and this was a critical lesson of 9/11 20 odd years ago, is the ability to interwork because you have an architecture that says public safety communications with the state police, with fire, with the towns, with the EMS. There's an interoperable network in which they can communicate, even if they retain local control over local assets. That's the distinction. It's think about the phone companies. There's not one phone company, but a call from Vermont Telephone to not Fairpoint anymore, Consolidated, goes right through, TDS goes right through because the telephone network has an architecture. In public safety, it's more complicated. You're dealing with more types of communications. Cellular is important, and a key thing will need to be done is to fill in the gaps for land mobile coverage, fill in the gaps for cellular coverage. Because really public safety people do carry cell phones, and they serve a need. And the same vertical assets, the towers, poles, can be used for both functions. So looking at this as a cooperative, not as each agency looking to grab its piece of the pie, but as something that everyone can work together on, works to everyone's mutual benefit. And that's really the key to addressing this, and where the subject matter experts, which I hope at some point to be involved in that, can come in and contribute to this, and where the task force can work with internal subject matter experts as well to know about how the agencies in the state operate.
Okay. So I understood that what would you suggest the architecture should be for our dispatch system?
Well, the architecture is something that needs to be determined at the beginning of the study. And this way, you can do an architecture and then do a trial. For example, I've heard talk of a 2-county trial where you do the design only for the 2 counties and make sure the architecture works. But the architecture would involve how do the public safety systems iterate? How does the microwave, to have a microwave backbone where you need that to connect to sites. This is a case where you can't rely on a single vendor's 2-way radio system, LMR, because frankly, some of the newer 800, 900 megahertz stuff that works in many states has problems in mountains. So you need to come up with an architecture that accommodates the VHF radios that are still going to be needed, that accommodates communication between cellular and land mobile and the dispatch systems, including the ones that are still local as well as central ones, and that's able to move communications among them all. Those are the things to try and focus on.
What you're saying is what we need, and I'll look to Barbara Neal, but I thought she was hiring the people, because that was one of the first tasks we gave them, was to inventory what's out there, which means who's using what kind of communications and what. And so that's what you feel that we need.
That's an important input.
Oh, yes. So Barbara, where are we with that? Do we have it? Are we getting there?
Well, I think that we're maybe using different terminology, but I don't disagree with any of those subjects that Mr. Goldstein just brought up. The goal of the task force, as defined in Act 78, is to manage and transition to a statewide reliable, which would include redundant, in my view, secure, interoperable public safety communication system. It specifically mentions integrated 911 call taking and regional dispatch centers. My view is the data collection the analysis and the inventory requirements of Act 78 are going to help us understand what the landscape is now, how those systems that exist now integrate already and to what extent, and then to come up with recommendations. Actually, we're asking for multiple potential models for where the state could go in the future. So we think it's important to know what's out there now, what can be leveraged now, where the gaps are, what we need to do to fix those gaps. And all of that is the work of that system planning vendor. So as I mentioned at the beginning, contract negotiations are about to start on that system planning RFP, and I am hopeful. I can't give you a date certain because you know how negotiations can sometimes go, but I'm hopeful that we'll get started very soon on that work.
Okay, so we are developing the architecture. Which is the most term, but that reading of what's out there, what is the bone structure like now? And where are we missing some connections? How do we get them in? Okay. Committee, any questions for anyone?
It's sort of all talk, if a backbone is gonna be created, is there someone hired to create one? Now. Is someone busy now creating one, creating a backbone upon which the tasks will be performed? Or are we still waiting to have someone design or define or identify?
That will be the work of the system planning RFP vendor.
We don't have one working now, someone planning it now, we're still in the formative stage?
We are just entering into contract negotiations with the selected vendor on the system planning RFP. That decision was made just today. We do have a project manager that is serving as a trusted expert for the task force to help us map out the work that needs to be done as well. But the actual work, all of the requirements that are outlined in Act 78 are included in the scope of work for the system planning RFP, which is the one we're just now starting to do contract negotiations with.
And you are behind on that, right?
I think it's, I'm sorry, did I interrupt?
No, I thought I heard you say that you were somewhat behind in the plan. I think some of us were seeing this moving a little bit faster when this.
I think the task force members would agree that we'd like to have had that portion, the system planning RFP, move a little bit quicker. There were some glitches with the RFP, like technical glitches with the RFP process itself. So we, at one point, we made a decision to, I'm going to use the wrong terminology, but reopen the RFP so that we could ensure that all of the vendors had the correct information, were able to submit their proposals. So that introduced a delay. And of note, you know, the act wasn't in force until the end of June because of the veto session. And then we were faced with some pretty historic flooding across the state that impacted multiple task force members for a period of time. So there were a number of things, but I think generally speaking, you know, we would have liked to have this moved along a little bit quicker, but here we are, and the work is about to begin.
Okay, because when that bill left this committee, I know we were very strong and we thought you needed to hire a project manager that would really be setting up all these things for you and helping you step through them. But it sounded like you've just got a trusted guy who's kind of out there, not somebody who's the boss.
No, we did hire a project manager. That happened earlier this month, and that's working specifically for the task force.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a little slower than we thought, but. Any other questions, committee? Sandra McCormick? No questions, okay. Okay, thank you, both of you, and for sharing your wisdom with us, and we'll see where it goes, but that is our update. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
So we're essentially where we were a year ago, or?
We've got some, you heard what I heard, we're a little further ahead. But not where we thought we'd be.
There are a variety of sums of money, as I understand right now, that are in various states of pending. Can you update us on where?
I think we lost her.
There's 11 million and a 9 million. Yeah, she doesn't seem to be there.
Yeah, she's not there.
Yeah, I thought you just kind of told her to leave.
Yeah, I
Yes,
think I probably I said thank you. So, I'm sorry. Ask.
These are big issues.
Yeah.
You know, this thing is going on forever.
Yes.
And it's been back here once already.
Email her and ask if she can come back
And
on.
we sort of sent it back. It wound up going back to GovOps. It's now back here again. We still have a bunch of money, some of which, my understanding is, has to be dealt with before year end or you lose it. And I'm really concerned that this thing is a mess.
I am too. It has not.
And the question is, how do we get this back on track?
I don't know. I know they're doing something in budget adjustment. I don't know what it is. We can ask to have appropriations.
At this point, it's unclear as to who's responsible for it now. Is this still GovOps'
It's got
responsibility?
GovOps is the
But
community
it's-
jurisdiction.
You know, we have a responsibility for telecommunications.
Right.
And so somewhere this falls under our arc. We've been dealing with it off and on, and I'm just very concerned that we've got a disaster on our hands. We have a bunch of money that, based on everything I know about it, we stand to lose if we don't get this back on track. And
Yeah.
either lose or have, whether it be the Department of Public Safety or someone else, spend the money without our involvement or oversight. And I just wonder if this is something, Madam Chair, whether it might be useful for you to, as we did, if you recall, over a year ago, consult with the pro tem, appropriations and GovOps to figure out who's on first here.
My understanding is that the committee of jurisdiction over this, because it's a public safety issue. If it's stringing wires, it's ours, but this whole study is in their domain. I will find out what is being done in the budget adjustment. That's from the House. The Senate just got the bill today. So I don't, they don't know what they're gonna do with it, but they'll be taking testimony. And
by they mean approach.
ropes,
Yeah.
yeah, they will be doing the testimony on the money that's in, whatever's in the budget adjustment.
And well, of course, they're the money committee,
Yes,
but we're the utilities.
yes.
So I'm wondering why it seems to me we ought to be.
Because we do utility regulation. This is a public safety. We haven't gotten into stringing any utilities yet, or we're not changing the electric or any of the utilities rules. Right now, they're trying to find out what the towns have, how they talk, and get public dispatch, which is a governmental function and is in GovOps. Any money goes through appropriations. If they start talking about putting up towers or stringing towers or actually changing the rules around towers, then you
Yes, I was still.
Yeah.
I do know that a colleague has joined us. And we want to.
who, no, this is committee discussion time. When we have the questions we want to have answered, we will find the answers. We are gonna get Senator Renner's, she didn't send it to me this morning, but we're gonna get her testimony in writing. But I'm trying to figure out. This was a review, we have no bill. We can make recommendations to approach. I know they're gonna be as concerned as we are about the lack of progress. But at this point, we don't have any direct jurisdiction. So we can advise our friends in appropriations as to what we'd like to see. I'm not, other than a lot more progress, I'm not sure what we'd like to see. Yes.
There were quite a bit of testimony, and one of the things that just recently was, towers, poles, landlines, cell towers,
Yeah.
system planning and logistics, and most of those things are operated and owned by utilities.
Yeah.
So we regulate utilities. And I'm not eager of fighting over whose territory this is, but there has to be some entity that inventories towers, landlines.
Well, that's what we just sent this committee to do. And I thought they'd have most of that done by now. They haven't.
And they haven't. They don't have it done. Have they even started?
They are in negotiations with whoever the consultants are that will do that work, was what I understood the festival.
Well, that's not designing anything. That's just finding out what
Barbara's
it is.
trying to rejoin.
Oh,
Would you like to
Barbara's
speak to
trying to
her?
rejoin, yes. So we're gonna have Barbara Neal back. And she can come join us. But they aren't talking about changing any policies about what goes on. They aren't changing any policies. They're inventorying what's out there in the towns. So that's not our jurisdiction. We don't have jurisdiction over local dispatch, thank God. We have jurisdiction over changes in the rules that govern poles and wires and towers, maybe satellites.
When we learn what poles and wires and towers are available to be cobbled together to create a system.
That's what they're supposed to be doing.
Well, it would seem that we would have to begin to have what looks like an inventory to turn someone loose on, but
That's what they don't have.
that's the step one.
Yes. Yes. And that's where they are. They're hiring.
Well, in addition to the issue of just, is this something that is moving? Is this a problem that's, been on our plate, on GovOps plate, on everybody's
Yeah.
plate for how many years now? And this doesn't seem like anything's happening. And we now have, as I understand it, there's some sum of money. I think there's $9 million.
Little Lakey money they can't.
And isn't that money gonna go away at the end of the year unless it's used?
Barbara, you there? Can you tell us about the money? There's, is it 9,000? And that was the late
9 million.
money?
9 million, yes. Again, for the record, Barb Neal, co-chair of the Public Safety Communications Task Force. And sorry I dropped off. I thought I'd been excused and I'm happy to be back. So there are.
I excused you because the committee didn't have any questions and then they had questions.
We changed our.
Okay. Fair enough. So there are two pots of money that are being discussed with this entire project. One is the $11 million in general funds. That is where the one and potentially up to $2 million for subject matter experts is coming from. There's also money within that $11 million designated for pilot projects when we get to that point. And I had mentioned pilot projects earlier and said that the task force was waiting on those. I don't mean to suggest that they won't ever be considered. I think that they will. It's just we want to have a system plan in place first in order to initiate a pilot project based on that plan. The $9 million that you're referencing is congressionally directed funds. So that were given to, not given to, they are under the direction of the Department of Public Safety. The commissioner was instructed actually in Act 78 to consult with the task force on how to use those funds, which she did. There was discussion on that. But ultimately that those funds are under the control of the Department of Public Safety as opposed to under the control of the task force. And that is related, I believe, to the requirements for those funds. Okay. And I'll stop right.
Has she used them, and if so, how?
So there has been a plan proposed for the use of those funds. I am not certain what state stage that is at this point. She would be the one to speak to about the details of that plan and where we stand. I do know that there is a December 2024 deadline, if you will, for the use of those funds. I don't know if that means they have to be spent by then or simply obligated by then. I don't know the answer to that. I do know that there are specific requirements related to the way this money was funneled down to the state that prohibits sub-granting or granting of these funds to other entities. So it's my understanding all of the funds need to be used for a project that is under the control of the state. But I do encourage you to speak to Commissioner Morrison about the details of all that. I have just kind of a high level understanding of what is going on with those funds.
See if we can get Commissioner Morrison in tomorrow. Or Friday, not Friday. We'll see if we can get her. Okay.
Look, somewhere there has to be a beginning point. Last year, government ops was discussing how to get money from all the member towns to participate in a system that hadn't been fleshed out. And it's not exactly from the start. Someone needs to start at the beginning.
So that's what we told them to do in this committee. Hire a project manager to inventory what's out there in who, you know, who's still using landlines and who's using cell phones and who's using cable and, you know, who's using radios and how those things interact. Because that is the architecture. That's what you need to know before you start putting them into a system. And that's what has not happened. That, to understand it, they are just beginning to hire somebody, a group, to do that inventory for them.
Well, I think the question we ought to be asking is, why is this moving so slowly and who's responsible?
So the Public Safety Communications Task Force is responsible for managing this transition. So I would say the task force is responsible. As I mentioned, there were some delays related to the flooding and other things, some technical glitches with the RFP process itself. But I would not agree with the assessment that nothing has happened. So there's been in those months since the task force formed, we developed and issued 3 requests for proposals, and various other work has been going on. We did hire a project manager a little bit later, as you note, than we might have preferred. We've evaluated multiple responses from highly qualified bidders on all of those or both of those RFPs and the legal RFP as well. And there is no dedicated staff for this task force. So it's, you know, you meet weekly, and there's not a dedicated staff working behind the scenes 40 hours a week in addition to that.
Okay,
So
on with your job is running E911. You are also running this board, and I assume Commissioner Morrison is also running the state police and is doing this in her off time.
Well, doesn't it say that the Department of Public Safety is to supply the staff associated with doing this?
I don't remember that.
Isn't that in the bill?
it says, if I can, that the Department of Public Safety will provide administrative support to the task force.
Administrative support, yeah.
Right. So we do have an employee of the Department of Public Safety who serves essentially as the task force clerk, you know, as far as attending the board meeting or the task force meetings and doing minutes and warning the meetings and all of that kind of thing. But the development of the RFPs and that kind of thing was the commissioner and I And we did, there was support from IT and other folks, purchasing folks at the Department of Public Safety for those things. But I guess my point is, you know, when the statewide 911 system, for example, was implemented many years ago, there was a staff that was working on it 40 hours a week, a small staff at first, and then it grew. I've reminded people a few times when they've brought up the question of sort of what seems to be slow progress. Back in 1993 or 94, when the Enhanced 911 Board was created, with a similar mission, right, to manage and oversee the transition to a statewide Enhanced 911 system. The creation of the board happened in 1994. The first 911 call happened in November of 1998. So that's a 4-year span, 3.5, 4 years, depending on when things were signed, sealed, and delivered, I suppose. But there is a lot of work that goes into these types of projects. And essentially the task force, you know, we have been talking about it for the past couple years, of course, with the Regional Dispatch Working Group. That group did good work in getting us to the point where we identified that we needed these subject matter experts to help us with this enormous project. Then the task force was created, and we are continuing on with that work. Step one is the work that's about to begin, which is to get that inventory, the data collection and analysis of what is out there in the dispatch emergency communications landscape now. There's, in my view, no other place to start. So that's where we are. I hope that's helpful for context as far as sort of the speed of the progress.
I think the thing that I had been focusing on was that this is in addition to your regular job. And can I assume we aren't paying you any additional wages to do this?
You're right. It is in addition to, but all of the task force members, actually, not just me. And
everybody is a volunteer, and they all have their other jobs that they have to leave to volunteer, which may one of the reasons it's slow. I'd like it to be.
If I could make just one other point, I think that the progress of the work will get notably better once we have that the system planning subject matter experts on board, right? So we are, like I said in my initial report there, we're hopeful but not yet quite certain that we're going to meet those deadlines that were defined in Act 78. But I don't see if we have to move those deadlines, I don't see it moving by huge amounts of time. So we will have more information for you on that once we get this contract in place and we've got a commitment to certain timelines.
Okay. Committee, other questions?
I don't know how to ask it. I don't know how to ask a question about something that appears to be as unorganized and landless as this. Someone has to be in charge that knows how to
That's why.
get people to do stuff.
That's why we put a project manager in last year. I remember the discussion. There has to be one person that's in charge of doing this.
And what's the date again by which there will be a project manager charged? There is a
project manager who is keeping track of stuff, but doesn't sound like he's got an executive authority to tell you this is what needs to get done.
No, that's correct. He is it's a company, are trusted advisors to the task force. The very first task that they were charged with was helping us evaluate the system planning responses to ensure that we were taking all things into consideration about the proposals on the bigger work, right, of the system planning itself and meeting all those requirements of Act 78. It was a step we felt we needed to take in order to ensure that people who operate in this industry had the same impression of these proposals as we did, and that we weren't that we were taking all things into consideration. So it was a very good use of their services right from the get-go.
Okay. Senator Burke.
This may be a sign of spending full days with Senator McDonald for many years, but this is reminding me of when we talk about stuff like, you know, needing a supreme allied commander who leads an entire operation as opposed to having someone who might be a captain, well below, very competent, not in charge of D-Day.
Yeah.
And so we have people working, but doesn't feel to me like anyone sort of owns it and says, oh, I have to get this done, or else we're
That
we're gonna.
that is a base problem with our volunteer system. Everybody's volunteering. I guess we have a hired project manager, but it's like a city, you know, we have a strong city manager, weak council. The manager comes to the council and says, look, this is what you need to do, and you need to do it now, or else, or this would be a great idea. And he's the one that's supposed to have the expertise that the rest of us who are just citizens don't. I mean, what do I know about public infrastructure?
It seems to me that, you know, when you have people who are chairing this operation, who are state employees, they're not volunteers.
No.
You know, you work at a corporation, you may have a task to perform that is outside of your normal operating duties, but it's a task that you have to perform that's an integral part of the duties. And I'm very dissatisfied with the way this is going. And I think there ought to be consequences. Either we get this moving the way it should be, or we should have different people doing it.
Okay.
Somebody needs to be in charge.
Somebody has to be accountable for this stuff.
And be
Starting
able
with
to
us.
dismiss people who aren't doing what they're directed to do.
Okay. I don't think we have the authority to do that. If we can come up with a plan, we can bring it to the committee who does have the authority to do that. In and of ourselves. I think we can work out a plan moving forward. We are where we are. We can set timelines, we can set, you know, we want you to have this much of the inventory done by then. And hold them to it, but I don't know. If we don't have the support of the committees of jurisdiction, we'll talk to.
This can't be done by committees of jurisdiction. Someone's gotta be in charge.
I think that's the governor.
And usually that's sort of like an administration function.
Yeah.
They for this. And so Senator Brock, you have a quote short communications channel with the administration. Could you recommend a few people that you might sit down with, members of the administration, to impress on them what needs to be done?
Well, I think the fact that the committee has discussed at some length, and I gather there's at least a degree of consensus that we're not particularly happy at what we see. Is that a fair statement?
Well, that's, yeah, we're.
And that we are concerned that there needs to be a degree of focus on turning this around.
Yeah.
And ownership, a sense of ownership, I would say, you know.
Okay, I've got Senator Shin. Hasn't.
In defense of the administration, what I recall of them from last year is they are looking for the legislature, if I recall correctly, and I don't mean to put words in their mouth, they're looking for the legislature to clarify if regional dispatch is in fact a state function or if it is left to the municipalities. And they are looking for that clarity and the authority.
That is a fair statement.
And the authority, so my conversations with public safety, I'm not gonna name names, but with the Vermont State Police, is that right now they don't have the authority or the resources to take ownership and the bull by the horns. And so they're looking for the legislature to give them that if in fact we want that type of state centralized control.
Which returns us to the conversation the chair and I were having. That we are the committee of jurisdiction over utilities.
So do we see this as a state function that we should take
Okay.
away
Yeah,
from?
but I think
this
in terms of which committee,
It,
that's
according
this committee.
it was sent to Gov Operations. Who's in charge of dispatch? Is it the state government or is it the local government? Is a government operations decision. We aren't doing anything with utilities right now. We aren't changing any rules. We aren't, and this was supposed, the state police, I believe, have been very clear that they did do some local dispatch, that they do not have the staffing to do that anymore. And so this was an attempt to at least start to create a coordinated municipal, which has more, it just, every town is different. Everybody gets their dispatch somewhere else. Some places it's the sheriff's, some places it's the fire department. And that's what they've been supposing to inventory and figure out how we can make it into a whole.
Because there's varying degrees of investment, so
Yeah.
some municipalities have spent tons of money and they have something that's really working well, and so if we just take that away from them, it's gonna disrupt things and carry
I've
a
got
cost.
two cities here who were all set, thought they had the money, and then we pulled it back. They were the next line for grants for this Leahy money to do dispatch for central Vermont. Barry and Montpelier were working together to do that dispatch and try and set up a system. And so that would have been a really good kind of test case, but they're not ready to do that yet.
But I agree, if I may, I agree with you that we need that inventory, and that's what we're pressing for now, so we can see what status of investment there are across the state, so we can start to look at different levels of coordination and maybe subsidy.
And it is moving slower, I think, than any of us want. I think it was in my other committee, that some of you were there with me, that dispatch or lack thereof was an issue. And so, yeah, if we're gonna have more of these, we definitely need a better system of public safety and dispatch and communications, and that's because it's.
Keep going if you want.
Okay,
Sure.
go ahead. No,
Okay.
we've got one more discussion we have to have.
One other unifying aspect that I think could be part of this conversation, and I'll bring it back to the universal service fee, is I am under the impression that our universal service fee on our cell phone bills relative to other states is extremely low. If we look at increasing that to dedicate it to regional dispatch, that is a pot of money that can start to unify and align different investments and municipalities out there, knowing that they can start to offset towards that more unified pool.
That's what we did with broadband for many years, and that's why there was no broadband. We could look at raising it. I don't know if we would succeed, but we could.
And I think that was in one of the recommendations in the reports that came forward, and that pool of money can be dedicated as a
You could be
continuous source
dedicated
to
to
stand up.
making this transition, but first we found out what kind of trouble there is when there's money out there. No, we're planning to use it. Okay. So we can have Gov Ops in. I could ask for a joint meeting to talk about this. Or we can craft a letter expressing ideas.
My suggestion would be that it might be useful to have a meeting of the chairs who are involved. See if we can come up with a better resolution before getting everybody else to.
Involved. Do we want,
Discussion.
do you want to have Jennifer Morrison in on Friday?
Yeah, if I may.
If we can get it, I mean, we just can't snap our fingers and.
To Senator McDonald's point, and I love our legislature, we are not experts on this, so I am looking for leadership from the administration, from the Jennifer Morrisons, from the BSPs, for them to say, this is what we think you should do in the legislature, so that we have that. I know they want us to create some guidance, but I definitely want to hear from them.
This is the type of thing, Mike Smith would be assigned to.
Yes, and he'd fix it.
Pardon?
And he'd fix it.
Yeah, but so we're not,
I've heard he's retired finally. We're taking
He
wages
said
on
that the
VSAC.
last 5 times.
So
I
Senator
know,
Donald,
VSAC, it's a running joke, he's all that.
Senator Donald just sent me a note suggesting instead of Mike Smith being available to use George Patton.
Okay.
He is available.
All right, we will have Jennifer Morrison in, at least she can tell us what's happening with the $9,000 or $9 million. And what the constraints are on that, and maybe we can just get some clarity on that one and wipe it off the board. And, then I will see if I can talk to the chair of GovOps and copy appropriations and see if we can figure out what's going on. Okay. Thank you, Barbara. This time I think you are dismissed because I'm not gonna let them ask any more questions.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much. And we are available for questions as needed, of course. So talk to you all later.
Okay. Thank you.
Not sure we were doing very well on actually asking questions, but
We were doing more venting, but
Gotten all the answers we need.
so anyway, we need to have a little committee discussion about that. 236, that's the Act 248 criteria. I have no more witnesses that have in on that one. And I'm just trying to get committee thinking. Are we thinking of doing away with the criteria? We've heard PUC say they don't use it very often. It would essentially cut abutters and neighbors out of the process. I don't happen to think that protecting the property value is a criminal offense, which I think was applied the other day. But there isn't in because I just don't want anything to change, and we're always trying to find that balance. But we do need renewable energy, and I'm not thinking wind energy, because that is controversial and it could have some health impacts, but solar. So do we want to keep? Yeah, what do we want to do? What do we need to hear? Who do we need to hear from in order to be ready to make that decision? Or I guess if we make no decision, then if we do nothing, then nothing happens and the aesthetic criteria stays in. Which means I could put it on the wall for a while, if people want to kind of think about it.
I guess the question is, and maybe some of the testimony within one ear and out the other, is having what we have now impeding the development of renewable energy based on what we've seen in practice.
Do renewable energy people say yes? Or it'd
But,
be
you know,
easier?
I haven't seen a whole lot of examples. And the one thing I saw mentioned was the project in Manchester, and there's a healthy debate as to
Yeah.
whether that did or did not. And
It was in front of.
did we hear much of anything else?
No, we heard about the Bradford project, which turned out that wasn't aesthetics. Did you hear one?
I was just saying, I think most of the argument was on just two particular cases, so.
Yes.
I mean, in terms of generalizing into a larger problem, to your point. I haven't seen the data that tells me that it's a large scale problem. I can imagine some people being unhappy with those choices. I think the Bradford one was.
It turned
That
out,
was a scenic area, it seemed,
but it was,
stretch.
yeah,
But the neighborhood that overlooked a field, and imagine how people that are used to a field that they don't own, but they enjoy seeing, they like to see it stay a field. We have that all the time.
Yeah. That was not a scenic area, it was a damn strip mall.
yeah.
And they had, the town had invested sewer and water and stuff to use that for enhanced strip mall. And
Development area.
yeah, it wasn't
And No,
a scenic
no. that's-
visual thing, it was,
That's what we were
that
talking
wasn't what
first
they
about.
invested that. Wow.
Yeah,
prepare that.
and it went to a field up back by that interstate.
But wasn't it objected to on the basis of it's in a scenic area and?
That's what the first people told us, that it, because the town can't name it Route 25 as a scenic route. Well, it is until you get to 91 and you go under the 91 bridge and you've got a major intersection, there's a gas station, there was an old, I don't know, garage, but I went to an antique auction there every Friday night for about 10 years. And it's your classic off the interstate, get a McDonald's burger, get some gas and get back on kind of place. So the town objected because it was against, we heard from the next group. No, we heard from the PUC on that the town objected because their plan was for that would be a development area and they had run town water and sewer out there. They invested in it. And there was another alternative closer to the scenic route. So that's where it went.
So it wasn't a bad, it's a reasonable decision. in
Yeah.
the Circumstances.
Yeah, it wasn't. Both parties used Manchester and both had the same. And without being able to stand back and look at the surroundings, it's really hard to know. PUC said that wasn't aesthetic, it was the only one that he can remember being done on aesthetics, because there was worker housing, moderate housing in the growth all overlooking that. And they said, no, and we, there was no screening, those weren't cedar trees put up that were only 5 feet tall after 10 years. There wasn't any real screening.
I'd say two things on this. One, and I don't know where the status of this is. I've looked to others that are more plugged into things, but I have the impression that as much as this hasn't been an issue prior to now, in light of the effort for the renewable energy standard and how we want to have solar panels, this is an anticipation of a lot more solar projects wanting to come in. So with that being said, I will say the following, which I've said to other advocates. I, as a Vermonter, and don't like seeing solar fields along farm fields along Route 7. I just think there's better uses for that land, and I would rather see houses underneath those solar panels. And so this language, I could go either way on it, but I would almost definitely support a carve out which would say aesthetics on dual purpose properties cannot be used. What do I mean by that? I would love to make it extremely easy to put solar panels over parking lots so that I take away any aesthetic complaints, because that's where I'd rather see more of our solar fields, not in farm fields out in the country where it's cheaper, where it's green fields. I want to find economic incentives to put them over already impermeable surfaces, so we're dual purposing them and achieving other benefits.
We've already done that for a while, didn't allow you to put solar anywhere but on recycled landfills, roofs, and over parking lots. And as the lady pointed out, Renewable Energy Vermont really is, a business entity. Everybody on that board is connected to renewable energy and they are for profit. It would make it much easier for them if they didn't have to take the time out to have every neighbor or anyone within 10 miles that didn't want to look at it be able to get involved. On the other hand,
We have contributed to that by suggesting that renewable energy projects would be better suited to be close to the distribution lines.
right,
And that Route 7 is where the distribution lines go.
Right.
And
yeah.
it's
Never run 3 phase power.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think there's a couple of elements of this conversation that have not been said out loud, almost as if it's all already a given, it's taken for granted. First of all, I note that Act 248 and Act 250 are fraternal twins. I mean, Act 248 is explained to people, it's Act 250 for utilities.
Yeah.
Okay, and processes are similar in some ways. And in this discussion, we have been, it's as though it's already been decided that citizens intervening is by definition of everything. There's something we want, and citizens intervening slow it down, sometimes stop it,
Adds to
make
the
it more fair. Therefore, we should do away with that interference so as to expedite this thing we want. And the thing we wanted for the last 50 years has been the tax advantage and the influx of capital, the jobs created by development. Just hooray. Or more recently, we're shifting to building of affordable housing. But it's about we want that construction. And interfering with it is by definition a bad thing. That presumes that the objections that Vermonters raise are without merit. And we see that in particular with aesthetics, which is by definition without merit because it's a kind of silly thing to get exercised about when you got tax revenues and affordable housing and jobs and all the good stuff that comes from the development we want. And now you've got clean energy as well. And the whole environmental movement has been split against itself on that issue. I mean, I'm getting hammered from the left more than from the right, from environmentalists. You know why? Because I'm slowing down clean energy. Okay?
Oh,
And-
on that side, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, I think it's questionable. The others who might be weaponizing environmental concerns to slow down renewable energy. Who are in essence saying someone else has to experience the impact of fossil fuels,
Well, let me
which
say,
is,
yes,
I think unfair and unjust.
I have helped people as an environmentalist, a champion of clean energy. I have helped constituents slow down, actually stop a solar array because it didn't belong there where it was proposed. But what I said to them, because they will hooray for us, we want, thank you, Dick, you were with us. And my answer was, no, you're halfway there. It doesn't belong here. You have a duty to decide where it does belong. Okay, and I would say that about anyone who raises objections that interfere with affordable housing, or interfere with clean energy, or interfere with shopping malls that brought capital into the state. And the whole idea underlying Act 248 and Act 250, always going back to Dean Davis, was that we want that development. There was never we're anti-development. It was that we want development, but you gotta do it right. And part of deciding what doing it right is or isn't, is that citizen activism, which is not interference, it's citizen, or maybe it is. I guess I said, this is something that we didn't assume it without actually saying it. That when citizens intervene, that's a bad thing. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. I think sometimes they provide us a great
Your
service.
premise assumed that all intervention is bad. I would argue that some intervention can be just, can add to the cost, and it also can be used as just an endless delay tactic. So having participation and feedback, I think, is a good thing, but it has to have some parameters, some boundaries, some reasonableness to it. So it's not just used to drag it through the courts, and definitely rising up the cost of doing everything. I'll make it.
My premise is not that all the interventions bad, saying that seems to be done on state. I will tell you, having once chaired an Act 250 commission, I knew when someone was playing the system. You knew when someone was misusing the system, and it was we were interfering with people's exercise of their property rights. It was our duty to not let that happen. We denied party status more often than we granted it.
Okay, maybe. We're doing mapping, we're asking for less regulation to do housing. But we're saying, this is where housing can go. We've got a mapping system. With the lady Dawn that talked to us today, Allison. They have, in Danville, they have designated areas, and I believe we have required that every town designate an area, a reasonable area, not that would be suitable for energy. And we were looking at telecom towers and things then. But if towns have designated an area, then maybe there would be no appeal. that if you're in there and you meet the criteria, but not take it away if you want to fill up that field with all maple trees, overlooking the presidential, or looking up towards the presidential range, there you probably would want a field. So that might be something.
I think a sensitivity to aesthetic issues and an appreciation for aesthetic is not trivial. It's what makes us civilized people.
Well,
In a better sense of
I
the word.
thought you were gonna go in a different direction, which is to say we're assuming that renewable energy is ugly. I mean, we're treating it like an aesthetic concern. Whereas you're already on a road with utility poles and Dollar Generals and, you know, other things that somehow we're isolating this as specifically ugly. When it's providing us power that is not harming someone else's health the same way. Someone is going to disagree with me for saying that, but is certainly not the same as carbon emissions. And I was actually very offended with statements like, I'm sorry they're not black, and these are the same things, they're just, you know, defined differently. Anytime we say this is ugly and I don't want it, we're saying I'm okay with somebody else breathing in toxic air because we're not going to produce enough renewable energy to actually meet our own standards. Is that right?
Well, at this point, the requirement under the current red is 10% by 2030, and we're 2032, sorry. And
2032 now?
well, the current red is
Okay.
2032. And we're on track to meet that. But people are saying, well, 10% is not ambitious enough. We should be aiming for more, but
And that's 10% in state?
in state.
Okay, and right, I don't think particularly ambitious.
But, you know, just the, I hear what you're saying, the only sort of caution about it, I think, it is me that, when you talk about others suffering for that we have, there is an impact elsewhere, but depending on what power you're buying from where, and utilities make those decisions on their own, so the portfolio of ISO in general is not the portfolio of our utilities. They end up having power purchase agreements to buy power. I think we're already like 96% carbon free. That means we're including nuclear. So I think when some people are upset with us not making more progress, they're looking at what is happening in ISO New England. And they're saying, well, you have a role in that, and you're making someone else live near a generating station that's emitting. But if in fact Vermont utilities are not buying power from that facility or from the utility that operates that, then that's, I'm not sure, I'm saying it'd be great if we were emitting less. I just don't know to what degree we own those emissions, so.
Okay, but what I hear us saying is we care about climate change and this is the top priority for us. But the tools that we need to make the transition are ugly and have no place in Vermont.
I'm not saying.
That is what I feel like we're saying when we say that there's an aesthetic reason.
I just rather than the parking lot.
I heard we don't want them on the side of Route 7, which I don't agree.
I feel like there's so many.
That.
And I'd rather have houses underneath,
Yeah.
and we're gonna use that land, but it's not against it.
It was an early phase with sort of not an accident, it was at Center McDonald's. Green phase was running right down Route 7. Green space right on Route 7. People said, oh, this is gonna be the most cost effective place to build an array. So, you know, if you ever, the perverse thing to me was, I supported, renewable generation in the state. But if you ever wanted to set the maximum number of people, you would build all of it right on Route 7 so that everyone would see it on the busiest road on the west side of the state. And because that's where the power lines were, that's where it landed now, because of the planning tools and stuff, and towns being able to hear where things land. through their town plan, their energy element in their town plan. That element mostly disappears.
So then get rid of this.
Those things are around, so it just triggered a lot of people and it's just. It's unfortunate, but that's what, how we do out there.
The first renewable energy was done by lottery.
Right.
Yeah.
Put in the applications and they pulled names, pulled the applications out of the hat.
Yeah.
And it wasn't connected to anything,
That
so
was
we're better off than that.
So we used to call that corporate law.
That's the way to go.
Well, that was under standard offer, right? It was a lot,
Yeah.
it was oversubscribed.
Yeah.
Things like
Paying above
engineering,
market rate to
but
authorities
isn't a
for
good
renewable
place for
energy.
it. Or.
Okay. Senator Brown, any question?
I was just going to comment that renewable energy is a priority. Having a living, a safe and beautiful environment that is attractive and attracts people is also a priority. And it's just like we have lots of priorities, but it's the issue of exercising judgment and balance.
Dean Davis. Thank you. That is the underlying premise of both Act 248 and Act 250. And you also, I gotta say, if in terms of saying, if someone objects on aesthetic grounds to say a solar array, that necessarily means the solar array can't be built. It doesn't necessarily mean that. It might mean it can't be built there.
Or it might just mean that the district commission disagrees with them and says, yes, it can.
That's right, that's right. And the fact that it might take some time for these Vermonters to be heard from, I hate the term NIMBY, because property rights are a constitutional, private property is a constitutional right. People have a right to protect their interests.
But that, you're saying they have a right to do that by telling other people what to do on their.
No,
private
not
property.
telling, no, because they don't have the authority to
Everybody
tell
has
people.
a right to, I don't
They can
care.
bring their case
Yeah.
to the commission, they
If we
can
put-
make their case.
If we put it in a low income, all BIPOC community, I want them to have the same right to protest that this thing is ugly and we don't want it stuck in our neighborhood. I think that's, it's not,
Well, I
it's
mean,
not that
sadly, what's happening in the country is we have oil refineries next to elementary school. So I think there are lots of people who would like the privilege of saying a solar array is ugly, but they don't have that privilege. They lose a lot of their rights when fossil fuel emitting facilities are co-located in their neighborhood.
Yes.
One wish is they would have Act 248 before they built
I mean,
the.
Also like to have an oil well in your neighborhood.
This area, so I probably should go match on that.
So what you're saying affirms that politically powerful people push things away from that. And they end up somewhere else.
I'm not, I'm agreeing or disagreeing with that, we're talking about refineries and Louisiana, like that, I get it, that
Yeah.
happens.
But you don't,
It's probably still happening. but
It's,
new-
so
new-
where is it happening here?
Well, that's,
That's the only thing we can control. And I haven't seen it happen here. I think yes, there's easier to stick stuff, solar arrays up in the kingdom. Because,
well, there've been a lot of environmental justice concerns around the McNeil generating plant for years, sawdust on people's cars and in their neighborhood. I mean, there's been these kinds of concerns. They're on a much smaller scale because we don't have power stations that much bigger than McNeil.
well, you speak when you was
Yeah.
operating.
Right.
okay. I don't think we're going to agree on this one at this point. So I'm gonna let it sit for a while and percolate. Yesterday, I thought we were near a compromise. I think I asked Jane to have the treasurer come in on Friday. We haven't gotten yet because I'm not sure. It sounded like everybody could live with letting the credit unions have access to the CD section, but Joe Bergeron, they know they just don't have the capital. They're never gonna be able to handle big deposits. But if we gave them access to the CDs, they would have something they could handle. I think that's as close as we might come to compromise if people agree. I can have it drafted and put it on for the vote on Friday. I'm not, you want
I'm not overly enthusiastic, obviously, in terms of the difference in franchise tax. As to why you benefit them and you don't benefit the branch. And the argument is that, well, it's the credit unions give the money back to their owners. Well, the banks give the money back to their owners.
yeah, just different numbers.
I don't see a whole lot of difference there.
I think credit unions have, I never heard of a credit union till I went to work in a mill town in Pennsylvania. And let me tell you, I learned about credit unions really fast because for those working people that, you know, were pouring molten steel, they didn't make enough of access to Carnegie Mellon Bank.
Yeah.
So they set up their own little credit unions, and it was the way they were able to buy houses and live there.
Well, the question is, you know, as with what you're proposing, is a limited amount. I mean, I don't know how much money, if at all, that represents in terms of what a potential franchise tax would be on institutions doing those transactions. My suspicion is it's probably minimal.
I think it's probably is, because the credit union, the treasurer didn't think the credit, they could even handle that. You only had, I think, 2 banks that had the capability, but it would be something. Senator Gray, you have your hand up.
Oh, sorry, Miss Leedy. That keeps me from falling over. Thank you.
Okay.
That's your recommendation, Madam Chair, as a way to get through this?
I think it would be the easiest way with the least amount of damage to revenue to get through it.
There'd be room in future years to expand it.
Yeah.
Well, it'd be great if we could have, and I don't know if JFO could just give us a ballpark numbers. What are we talking about in terms of franchise tax loss
We might,
for doing that?
yeah, we might get a better read from the,
I suspect it's minimal, but I think, you know, I think we would be easier making the decision for all of us if we had a number to show that it was in fact. de minimis.
we can ask the treasurer to talk to JFO and give him his estimate of how many credit unions, how much money would go out of the franchise tax, and then they could say,
An
well,
idea or a range or a ballpark
Okay.
or whatever.
so maybe we could send an email.
So you already have me reach out to the treasurer's office with the question about what banks are allowed to do with the state funds that they're holding.
Yes, that was
They
the
got back
question
to
that
me
was still. open.
And told me that the Department of Financial Regulation would be able to answer that question better than they.
Okay. Well, let's,
We give it to the E911 board. I don't expect an answer anytime soon.
yes, you can head out. Okay, maybe I will see if I can get the treasurer to send an estimate of what it would be. And they might be able to do the estimate of the franchise tax. If not, I'll ask them to consult with JFO and tell us that.
But I believe they agreed to send it for Rockets. I mean, if this is $50,000 a year estimate, then I'm fine with it. But if we're talking about $500,000 or $1 million in this budgetary cycle, then I'm much less inclined to see.
Yeah, that would be all right. Okay. Okay, we'll get those numbers. I think that's it, unless you can think of something else. I can do it.
Oh, there's something this.
What's that?
I can support that.
No, I haven't.
Going back and forth, you actually persuaded me that if we now have a buffer in place
We
that
usually hand it out.
prevent more of those solar panel fields to just off the landscape at the local level, then my concern.
They were like citing